The afternoon sun filtered through the paper windows of the modest training hall in Foshan, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The year was 1963, and the world was changing rapidly. Bruce Lee, now a rising star in America, had returned to Hong Kong to visit his beloved master one last time before his Hollywood career would consume him entirely. Ip Man sat calmly on a simple wooden stool, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes half closed in meditation. At 59 years old, his face carried the wisdom of countless battles, both physical and philosophical. His body, though aged, still possessed the quiet strength of a coiled spring. Bruce Lee paced back and forth across the training hall, his energy filling the room like electricity. He had just returned from America, where he had witnessed the brutal efficiency of modern warfare, the cold precision of firearms, and the skepticism with which Westerners viewed traditional martial arts. Sifu. Bruce finally stopped pacing and turned to face his master. His voice carried a mixture of respect and genuine confusion. In America, they laugh at kung fu. They say it's just dance, just movies. They have guns now, weapons that can kill from 100 meters away. Ip Man opened his eyes slowly, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had heard this argument before, from younger students, seduced by the apparent superiority of modern weapons. "Tell me what troubles you, Ali," Ip Man said softly, using Bruce's childhood name. Bruce Lee's jaw tightened. He respected his master deeply, but the question that burned in his mind had to be asked. In a world of bullets and bombs, what was the purpose of spending decades perfecting the art of the empty hand? "Sifu," Bruce said, his voice rising with intensity, "I must ask you something that has been haunting me. Could Wing Chun stop a bullet?" The question hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, the only sound was the distant chirping of birds outside. Ip Man's expression didn't change. He didn't laugh, didn't show offense, didn't dismiss the question as foolish. Instead, he stood up slowly, his movements fluid despite his age. "Come," Ip Man said simply, gesturing toward the center of the training hall. Bruce Lee moved to the center of the room, confusion evident on his face. Ip Man walked to the far wall and picked up a small wooden dummy head used for precision training. He placed it on a shelf at chest height, then returned to stand beside Bruce. "This dummy represents a man with a gun," Ip Man said. "Tell me, Ali, what do you see when you look at it?" Bruce studied the wooden head carefully. "I see a target, Sifu. I see an opponent." "Exactly," Ip Man nodded. "You see what your eyes show you. But what about what your eyes cannot see? What about the intention behind the trigger? What about the fear in the heart of the man holding the gun? What about the split second between decision and action?" Ip Man moved to the center of the room, his posture relaxed but attentive. "You ask if Wing Chun can stop a bullet. This is the wrong question. A bullet is not alive. A bullet has no intention, no fear, no hesitation. A bullet is already the end of a story that began much earlier." He began to move slowly, demonstrating the basic Wing Chun stance. "Wing Chun does not stop bullets, Ali. Wing Chun stops the man who fires the bullet. There is a moment, always a moment, between thought and action. The master lives in that moment." Bruce Lee's eyes widened slightly. He had trained in Wing Chun for years, but he had never heard his master explain it this way. Ip Man continued, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality. "In 1937, when the Japanese invaded China, I witnessed many things. I saw soldiers with guns kill martial artists who charged at them with swords and fists. I saw brave men die because they believed their kung fu made them bulletproof. This is not wisdom. This is foolishness." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But I also saw something else. I saw a Wing Chun master named Chen save an entire family from execution. The soldiers had their rifles pointed at the family. 12 guns, 12 bullets waiting to fly. Bruce leaned forward, completely absorbed in the story. Chen did not try to catch bullets, Ip Man said with a slight smile. He did not try to deflect them with his chi. Instead, he understood the real nature of the situation. He understood that before a bullet flies, a finger must squeeze. Before a finger squeezes, a mind must decide. Before a mind decides, fear or anger or duty must arise. Ip Man moved closer to Bruce, his eyes intense now. Chen walked toward the soldiers, not fast, not aggressive. He walked with complete calmness, his hands visible, his posture open. He spoke to them in Japanese, which he had learned. He acknowledged their duty, he acknowledged their honor, and most importantly, he acknowledged their humanity. As he walked, he observed. He saw which soldier was the youngest. He saw which hand was trembling. He saw which eyes showed doubt. And when he was close enough, not to their guns, but to their hearts, he directed his words to the one whose conscience was loudest. The young soldier lowered his rifle first, then another, then another. Chen did not stop a single bullet that day. He stopped 12 bullets by ensuring they were never fired. That is the highest level of Wing Chun, to win without fighting, to stop the bullet before it exists. Ip Man returned to his stool and sat down. But you ask about the physical. You ask if the body can move faster than a bullet. So I will tell you another story. In 1949, I was challenged by a man with a gun. He was a bandit, angry that I had refused to teach his gang. He said Kung Fu was useless against modern weapons. He said he would prove it by shooting me. Bruce's breath caught. He had never heard this story. I agreed to his challenge, Ip Man said calmly, but I made one condition. He had to stand 10 feet away and shoot at my chest. He laughed and agreed. He thought it was my funeral. Ip Man stood up again and gestured for Bruce to stand at a distance. The human reaction time is approximately 250 milliseconds. A bullet travels at roughly 400 meters per second. At 10 feet, 3 meters, a bullet reaches its target in approximately 7.5 milliseconds. This is impossible to dodge once the bullet is fired. Physics does not lie. Bruce nodded, understanding the mathematics.
But, IP Man raised a finger, the human finger takes approximately 150 to 200 milliseconds to complete a trigger pull. The human brain shows micro-expressions 100 to 300 milliseconds before executing a decision. The human body shifts weight, adjusts stance, focuses eyes all before the action occurs. A master of Wing Chun learns to read these signs faster than thought itself. IP Man demonstrated, moving his hand as if holding a gun. When the bandit aimed at me, I did not watch his gun. I watched his eyes. I watched his shoulder. I watched his breathing. The moment, and I mean the precise millisecond his shoulder tensed to absorb the recoil, I moved. With sudden explosive speed that seemed impossible for a man his age, IP Man shifted his body. Not to dodge the bullet, that is impossible, but to move my body before the bullet was born. By the time his finger completed the trigger pull, my vital organs were no longer where he had aimed. The bullet passed through the space where my heart had been 1/10 of a second earlier. Bruce Lee's mouth opened slightly in astonishment. Did I stop the bullet? IP Man asked. No. I stopped the man's ability to aim effectively by understanding and exploiting the gap between intention and execution. This is Wing Chun. This is what I have spent 50 years understanding. IP Man walked to the window and looked out at the changing world outside. You go to America, Ali. You see guns everywhere. You see violence that happens in seconds, and you wonder if our art has meaning anymore. This doubt is natural, but you are still thinking like a fighter, not like a martial artist. He turned back to face his student. The question is not, can Wing Chun stop a bullet? The question is, can Wing Chun create a world where the bullet is never fired? The question is, can Wing Chun teach the discipline that prevents the finger from squeezing the trigger in the first place? IP Man's voice grew softer but more intense. Every bullet that was ever fired was fired by a human being. Every death by gun began with a human decision. Wing Chun at its highest level is not about hand speed or foot placement. It is about understanding the human heart, both your own and your opponent's. He moved back to his stool and sat down with deliberate slowness. You will become very famous, Ali. Your movies will be seen by millions. People will watch you kick and punch, and they will think this is Kung Fu. But I tell you now, and listen carefully, the real Kung Fu is what they will never see in your movies. Bruce Lee's mouth opened slightly in emotion. The real Kung Fu is the fight you prevent by your presence alone. The real Kung Fu is the enemy who becomes a friend because you understood his fear. The real Kung Fu is the bullet that remains in the chamber because you gave the man holding the gun a reason not to fire it. IP Man closed his eyes again. I am an old man now. I have fought many battles. I have broken bones and drawn blood. I have defeated men twice my size and half my age, and I will tell you the truth that took me 40 years to understand. Every fight I won with my fists was a fight I had already lost with my wisdom. The room fell completely silent. Bruce Lee stood motionless, his mind racing through everything he had learned, everything he thought he knew, seeing it all in a completely different light. The bullet you asked about, IP Man said, opening his eyes and looking directly at his student, is just a small piece of metal. It has no anger, no ego, no fear. It is the purest expression of human failure, the moment when communication ended and violence began. Can Wing Chun stop it? Yes, but not by catching it or deflecting it, by ensuring the conversation never reached that point. IP Man stood up and placed his hand on Bruce's shoulder. You will face many challenges in America. You will face prejudice, anger, and yes, perhaps even violence. When that moment comes, remember this. The greatest victory is the one where no one has to lose. The strongest punch is the one you never throw. Bruce Lee's eyes were glistening now. The cocky young fighter who had entered the training hall was gone, replaced by a humbled student facing the vastness of his own ignorance. But Sifu, Bruce finally managed to speak, his voice rough with emotion. In the movies, people want to see the fighting. They want to see the power. IP Man smiled gently. Then show them the power. Dazzle them with your speed and precision. But never forget that what they see is the shadow of Kung Fu, not its essence. The shadow is necessary. It draws people in. But once you have their attention, you have a responsibility to show them something deeper. He walked to a scroll hanging on the wall, yellowed with age. This was written by my master's master 200 years ago. It says, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The supreme art of Kung Fu is to defeat violence without violence." IP Man turned back to Bruce. Can Wing Chun stop a bullet? The master stops the bullet by stopping the anger that loads the gun, by stopping the fear that aims the weapon, by stopping the desperation that squeezes the trigger. This takes more courage than any fight. This takes more skill than any technique. He returned to his stool one final time. You came here today with a question. I have given you an answer, but not the one you expected. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe 10 years from now, you will understand what I mean. And when you do, you will stop asking if Kung Fu can stop bullets. You will start asking how Kung Fu can stop the need for bullets to exist. Bruce Lee stood in the center of the training hall, overwhelmed by the depth of what he had just heard. 15 minutes had passed since his master began speaking, and he had not said a single word in response. Every response that formed in his mind seemed inadequate, superficial, missing the point entirely. IP Man watched his student with patient eyes, seeing the transformation occurring within him. This was the real teaching, not the forms, not the techniques. This moment where a student's understanding shatters and reforms into something deeper. Finally, Bruce Lee bowed deeply, the gesture carrying a weight of respect that went beyond tradition. When he straightened, there were tears on his cheeks. "Thank you, Sifu," Bruce whispered. "I came here thinking I knew what question to ask. You have shown me I didn't even understand the question." IP Man nodded slowly. "This is the beginning of wisdom, Ali. Not having the answers, but understanding that the questions themselves must evolve. Go now. Show the world your Kung Fu. But remember, for every fight you show on screen, live 100 moments where you prevent fights from starting. That is the real legacy of Wing Chun." Bruce Lee bowed again and walked toward the door. As he reached it, IP Man spoke one last time. "Ali?" Bruce turned. "The bandit who tried to shoot me," IP Man said quietly. "After I moved and his bullet missed, do you know what happened?" Bruce shook his head.